are you?
Hi!
So my name is Anders, and although I'm originally from Denmark, I've lived in various countries throughout my life. So I grew up in Rwanda in East Africa, and then I studied in the US and the UK, and I came to Myanmar 3 years ago. In a single word, I would have to say curiosity, because I knew very little about Myanmar back in 2015, 2016, but I did of course know that Myanmar is going through an immense historical transition, and I knew that if I was to spend time here, I would learn more and grow as an individual, as a professional, as an intellectual, more than possibly anywhere else in the world. So that was the initial interest, and then I first visited Myanmar in 2016 in November, just casually hanging out in Yangon as a tourist, didn't even go to anywhere else, not even to Dalat, and I had a really good time. I was really impressed with not just the friendliness of most people, but also the incredible diversity. Back then I had no idea what, Chin, Kachin, Mon, Shan, whatever, what any of that was, but I could see that Myanmar was, one of the most diverse countries in the world. It was possibly the most diverse place I had ever visited, culturally, but also on the food scene. I really, really enjoy exploring new foods. So yeah, that made me realize this was a place I would be happy in for at least for a while, and that I would like to spend some time in. Like I said, I knew I could learn a lot from being here, so I then decided to look for jobs here. Yeah, of course. It is true that most people in Myanmar are incredibly friendly. I think one of the things that surprised me the most was how incredibly honest everyone is. I sometimes will try at the market to walk away without taking my 100 jat change, and then they will literally follow me for 2-3 minutes, being like, "Oh, hey, you forgot your change," and I'm like, "No, it was 100 jat. I didn't want it." I feel this is one of the few places in the world where I feel comfortable leaving my backpack in a cafe. Just tell the staff, "Hey, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Please keep an eye out." No problem at all. I've never experienced theft here, and it is it is one of the safest places in the world. Yeah, I would say that's as a broad generalization, but that aside, it's very difficult to generalize about people in Myanmar because, of course, it is an incredibly big country and a very diverse country, and even within a place like Yangon, there's a lot of diversity. Like Sanchong has its own distinct culture and atmosphere, different from, say, Ledan or Insane, or Lain or Lantaya or Northagon or whatever. And in a similar way, you have that much more diversity as soon as you get out of Yangon. But in general, of course, I've had a very positive experience no matter where I went. And I've been to most states and regions in Myanmar. I haven't been south yet, but I've been to most of the states and regions up north, east and west. So whenever people ask me about my favorite thing in Myanmar, the first thing I always go to is food. Food in general, but more specifically Kachin food. That is my absolute favorite because it's incredibly fresh and spicy and savory, and also has a lot of variety. But even when it comes to different types of Myanmar cuisines, I always have my different favorite dishes where I go to certain restaurants just to eat that dish. So for example, if I want a certain kind of Kachin curry, I'll go to one restaurant in Sanchong. If I want Kachin beef noodle soup, I'll go to a Gape. If I want beef tongue or fish curry, I'll go to Jingpo, which is also nearby in Sanchong. So I have and the same thing goes even for other types of cuisine, like Shan food. I have different Shan restaurants that I go to for different dishes, whether I want sensi or tofu nui. Actually, if I want sensi, I go to a lady who is on my street back home in Sanchong, and if I want tofu nui, then I go to another, a more formal restaurant where you sit inside and everything. So I have my little spots for all kinds of food all over Yangon. But yeah, in general, I prefer northern types of food from southern types of food. Of course, part of it is the stereotype that southern food is a bit more oily and more heavy and more meaty, and I think northern food tends to use more herbs and vegetables, and it's also more spicy, which I really like. But I also do eat a lot of Min Hin, like Burmese curries. It's just, again, I have my very specific place. In fact, if you go 3 minutes over there, there's a place where I always go for sweet pork and pumpkin curry. You also asked me about celebrities. I don't follow, I know some Myanmar social influencers, and I do follow them if they're my friends, but they're not like the super influential ones. For example, a good friend of mine is Su Weipyo, who does a lot of travel blogging, and her content is really high quality, even though she doesn't have that many followers. It's about 1 lakh followers. I don't really listen to Burmese music, partly because it's still too fast for me to understand most of the lyrics. But I do know one Myanmar musician who I think is cool just because he really loves board games, and that's Sai Sai. So I don't know how many people know this, but he likes board games, and I love board games, and I only met him once very quickly. We didn't have time to play yet, but he was sitting with a board game, so I nerded out a little bit over that, and I just think that's awesome. And I wish more people in Myanmar played physical tabletop board games, because it's a great activity that gets you away from your phone and gets you playing and interacting with your friends for a couple hours, and you learn a lot from them. I also really, surprisingly, this might come as a surprise to some people, but I really like the bus system in Yangon. It's actually really relatively well organized. It's definitely a lot better than the bus system in Bangkok, and it's very cheap. Most of the buses now have really good air conditioning, and one very cute little cultural thing about the Yangon bus system is how everybody pays themselves. It's self-monitoring. You put money in the box, and you can't see if it's like a 50 kyat bill rolled up inside a 100 kyat. Like, you can easily cheat on it, but people don't. I mean, most of the time people don't. So it's based on the concept of honesty, which I think is actually beautiful, and it somehow crystallizes one of my favorite things about Myanmar culture, which is the openness and the honesty. Because I mean, not everybody here is, not everybody can be nice to you, but people will at least be honest. People don't steal. There are plenty of other forms of corruption and nepotism, but people don't directly steal most of the time. Anyway, so that's the infrastructure. Weirdly enough, I also have an affinity for the Yangon-Mandalay highway, but that's not because it's a nice highway. It's because I used to commute back and forth between Naypyidaw and Yangon on the buses, which again are super comfortable. The express buses are super comfortable and super cheap. And on those long trips back and forth, I would always listen to a lot of podcasts and relax and sort of have some, time for self-reflection, and my anxiety goes down. So I actually feel very relaxed on the Yangon-Mandalay highway no matter where I'm going, which is a weird, quirky thing. Favorite places, I'm not a big fan of like hot weather in general, which of course means, but it's hot most of the time in Yangon. So I really like the northern parts of the country, like northern Shan State. I've also been to different parts of Chin State a few times. I'm yet to go to Kachin State, unfortunately. But I really love mountains. I love hills. I love high altitude. I like mountain air. So basically, any part of the mountainous regions, I would say, are my favorites. Some particular places I really have enjoyed visiting would be, for example, Pa'an, because the people in Pa'an are incredibly forward. They're very smiley. They make eye contact and really like engaging and talking. Some other people in Myanmar, especially in Yangon, tend to be a little bit more shy when they talk to foreigners, which so it's quite refreshing. It was very refreshing when I went to Pa'an. I really enjoyed the weather of Hakka. I think Hakka is very underappreciated. It's not even that difficult to go there. There's an express bus with a good road that reaches there in 22 hours. Actually, you can now get to Kanpele in southern Chin State in just 13, 14 hours because they recently opened up an express bus route. And then boom, you're in the mountains waking up with clouds passing by your bedroom window, which is awesome. I also really like Punalin, mostly because of the coffee, because I'm a huge coffee aficionado, and they have good cozy cafes and lots of trees, and it's not as cool as Chin State, but it's still really nice climate there. So actually one of my potential future dreams of retirement is to buy a cabin somewhere in the mountains, maybe in like Shan State or Kachin State, and spend like the hot months up there reading and writing or something like that. But that's obviously a pipe dream. That's for like when I retire. I'm not I mean, it's not a very big one. It's probably what most people say, but I'm not a big fan of the heat and the humidity of Yangon. It's one of the slight downsides, I feel, because I'm more comfortable in cooler temperatures, and I also really like high altitude. The main challenge in the transportation sector is domestic flights. They're incredibly expensive, especially for foreigners, but even for locals, they're very expensive. And that's because there are a lot of challenges in the Myanmar aviation industry, even before COVID. So that's one of the biggest, I would say that's one of the only downsides, because actually the national highways are in fairly good shape. They're very comfortable, cheap express buses going to all parts of the country. But one of the reasons why I haven't been able to go, for example, to Dawei yet or Mie is because of how expensive it is to fly there, and I'm not particularly excited about taking like a 20-hour bus there. But I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I have been to different parts of Chin State, and I went there by bus. Bagan, Mandalay, Punalin, there are plenty of places you can go, and once you get used to trying to at least sleep on the bus, although I'm not a very good bus sleeper, it's not even that bad. Like you get there overnight, you wake up in your destination. And the service is really good. So I wouldn't, what I'm trying to say is that in general, I wouldn't complain about the infrastructure except for the aviation industry. Climate is definitely too hot for my taste. It's sometimes, I would say one of the biggest cultural barriers or communication barriers is that people can often be a little bit shy. Especially in a work situation, either people I work with or people who work for me, my employees, they can be a bit shy because of how strong social hierarchies are in Myanmar. At least with my employees, that's something I always try and overcome and say, no, I want you to be confident speaking to me and contradicting me and letting your voice be heard. And that takes a while. It takes a long time to kind of get used to that and have a good working relationship with local staff. But I mean, and sometimes they are not very good at communicating or not good at communicating in a timely manner, but these are things you can work with, right? It's something you can overcome if you hire the right people and if you work with them long enough to develop a constructive relationship where you can have frank conversations with each other. I know that many people, and I mean, I see it myself and I sometimes complain about it myself, it's hard to find talent in Myanmar. It's hard to find and hire talented people, not because people aren't very smart and hardworking, but because of the problems with the education system. But and that can be very frustrating because I sometimes feel as if, oh, I need to do everything myself, but that's not the case. In spite of all of that, it is possible, of course, to find people with skills and work experience who are, you know, young or mid-age. It's just challenging. It's difficult because, like I mentioned, the education system was hollowed out during the military era. And I do find that as an employer, I find that if I'm patient enough to work with people and train them and respect them and give them space to grow into their job and to grow into their capabilities, or sorry, to grow into their potential, you know, your average young Myanmar worker is perfectly capable of doing a good job at pretty much whatever you want them to, but it does take patience. A lot of my work has been in environmental economics. I've done a lot of research on solid waste management, and when you look at environmental issues, there is this general approach to it, like trash, wastewater, use of plastic and using overconsumption. There's a general approach of out of sight, out of mind. So a lot of people, people do care about trash in the street these days, but that's mostly because of the smell or how it looks or because it clogs the drains. And a lot of towns in Myanmar are really struggling with this, but people have a tendency to assume that, oh, if I can't see the garbage because the rain has washed it away, it means there's no problem. I do believe that, again, this is because of problems with the education system that has been weakened so much in the past half century. There's not a lot of critical thinking, there's not a lot of awareness about environmental issues, but it's quite unfortunate because Myanmar still has a lot of beautiful landscape and a lot of beautiful natural resources, like say the Irrawaddy River. It's a unique freshwater river. But people don't realize that there are, you know, tons of trash being thrown into the river every day because once it's there, it just goes further down. And yeah, relying too much on single-use plastic bags, styrofoam boxes to take your street food in. These things are not just wasteful; it's also very damaging to the environment and quite unnecessary. But most people don't realize how big of an issue this is, particularly trash, because you don't see the landfills. But also, like, waste of water is a common problem too, because people, at least in Yangon, rarely pay for the water, or if they pay a very small fixed fee. So people don't care about fixing leaking taps and pipes and stuff like that. And I think that's frustrating, but something that just needs to be worked on nationally. I think one of the biggest and perhaps also most positive surprises was how intermingled the different faiths are in Myanmar without most people maybe realizing. If you, for example, go to Sula Pagoda, you can see two mosques close to it. And you are within a few hundred meters of 2 or 3 Christian churches. And if you go west, then you walk past a Hindu temple, and then a little bit further, there's a Chinese temple. So because of recent political problems, people often forget how cosmopolitan Yangon actually is. And that perhaps is a unique thing to Yangon, maybe not so much to other parts of the country, but it is quite amazing that you have so many different distinct religions living side by side in relative peace and prosperity. The street that I live on in Sanchang, right across from me, there's a Sikh family. There's a lot of Muslims living in my neighborhood. I can see there's a mosque down by the main road, and if I go to one of the side streets behind my apartment, there's also a really small Hindu temple. And I find that very refreshing. But obviously that kind of interreligious harmony is not constant, even in Yangon. There is, of course, a complex history to it. But it's a reminder of, like, Yangon's unique colonial past. A lot of people don't realize this, but at some point in, like, the 1930s, this was the most international city in the world in terms of number of foreigners living and arriving here. And we see it today in the colonial heritage of the architecture all over the city. One of the things that surprised me the most of living and working in Myanmar is how self-aware people are, especially young people, about their knowledge gaps and the incredible eagerness to learn. I can't even count the number of times that somebody has told me, I need to learn more, I need to learn this particular skill set, or I don't have enough critical thinking skills, I'm not good enough at communication and writing, etc., etc. And I think that's incredible. It's very humbling that people, and fascinating that people have that kind of critical self-awareness about the missing skill sets, about the problems in the education system, and what they need to learn to move forward and to achieve their dreams and aspirations. So you mentioned this. I think you're right. There's an incredible amount of opportunity right now, but of course, that's part of this whole historical and political transition. Myanmar is at a watershed moment, and if certain national issues and regional issues and conflicts don't get resolved, Myanmar will not reap the benefits and the potential economic opportunities from it, in spite of having this very large, young, and eager workforce. I mean, yes, of course I've enjoyed being here, otherwise I wouldn't still be here after 3 years, and planning to stay for quite a while longer. Oh God, those questions of rating things from 1 to 10 are so tough because it's so complicated, and I've gone through a lot of changes and turmoil in my life. But I think, and also I'm really a Yangon boy. I've spent most of my time in Yangon, and I don't think that represents Myanmar as a whole. But Yangon is quite chaotic. It's crazy. It's diverse, and I think Yangon can let you be both the worst and the best version of yourself. When I lived here in the beginning, I was going through a rough time, and I drank a lot and partied a lot and wasted a lot of time and energy that way. And I think that, that's a negative version of myself because it's easy to live here. But I also later became a better version of myself because of the job opportunities I've been offered, the research opportunities. So it's been a very positive experience overall, but there are ups and downs to any life, to any country. So it's really impossible to put a number. I mean, some days it's a 3, some days it's a 5, some days it's an 8, but most of the time it's definitely in the upper ranges, like, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Like I said earlier, I intend to stay quite a while longer, although next year I'll be starting my PhD in Singapore. I'll be researching urbanization in Myanmar, so I'll keep coming back to Myanmar for research and for work, and I feel at home here, so it's also very likely that I'll spend quite a while longer in the future. Held og lykke med alting.